very busy day, and we're here 6 days a week now, Monday through Friday, 11 p.m. to 12 midnight Eastern Standard Time, and then we're still on Sundays, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time also. Well, we are 8 days away from the November 3rd election, and 62 million people have already voted in early voting. That is a record number of people voting early. It is estimated that by the time of the November 3rd election, as many as 100 million people would have voted by November 3rd. So we're going to give an update on what's going on, also an update on coronavirus. Coronavirus continues to rage across America, and we see that hospitals are starting to be overwhelmed also. We see that for Monday, October 26th, 71,000 new cases were reported. And it looks like the Trump administration has basically waved the red flag, or the white flag, waved the white flag on coronavirus. It appears that they have just given up. En Vogue had a song back in the early 90s, "Give It Up, Turn It Loose." It looks like they're just giving it up, throwing in the towel on it, saying we're just gonna have to learn to live with it. Joe Biden said we're learning to die with it. All right. So we're going to give an update on what's going on with coronavirus, and then also today, Jared Kushner was on Fox and Friends, and Jared Kushner made some very interesting comments. He basically said that African Americans grappling with inequality, inequality and racism are complaining, and he basically said they have to want to be successful for Donald Trump's policies to work. So this drew a lot of backlash, and I would say, what the hell did you think was going to happen? I mean, from many reports, Jared Kushner is a slum landlord in Baltimore. There were reports about this. You remember those stories about the buildings that he owned, the Baltimore apartment buildings owned in Baltimore that had rodents and things like that in them? So that drew a lot of backlash. He posted an article about that from thehill.com, also from NBCnews.com. To Jared Kushner, Black Americans grappling with inequality, racism is complaining. Now, Jared Kushner is like the poster boy for white privilege. I mean, this guy owes Deutsche Bank $285 million. He's the poster boy for white privilege. Okay? And he's going to say something like that. But once again, look who his father-in-law is, who is the least racist person you ever want to meet, which means you're still a racist, just not as much as other people. But when you take a poll. So, yeah, okay. Elections have consequences. Keep playing around if you want to. I told you. I warned you in 2016. People didn't want to listen to me. I warned you in 2016 about these jokers. People didn't want to listen to me. Okay, all right. Oh, whatever. 226,000 dead people from coronavirus. They basically given up, thrown in the white towel. 20% of the 226,000 are African Americans. In 2016, when Donald Trump asked African Americans, what the hell do you have to lose? I told you before, the correct answer was everything. When Donald Trump asked African Americans, what the hell do you have to lose? I told you before, the correct answer was everything. So now a lot of people understand what I was talking about. All right, so we'll talk about that. And then we have this story. I saw this a couple of weeks ago, and I was going to talk about it, but we didn't get a chance to talk about it. This is a study from MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, okay, MIT, that deals with how African Americans pay more for home ownership according to new research. African Americans pay more for home ownership, and it calculates how much that cost us in lost earnings for retirement. How much that cost us in lost earnings for retirement. So this ties into the wealth gap. All right. So when Jared Kushner says African Americans have to want to be successful, no, he doesn't want to deal. He and his white supremacist father don't want to deal with racism and understanding racism as a system of advantage and privilege distributed based upon race, which comes out of the ideology of European white supremacy. They don't want to deal with this. Okay, they just want to act like, racism is the figment of somebody's imagination. No, not at all. Racism is real. Racism is a system of advantage and privilege distributed based upon race, and racism occurs when one race of people control the majority of the wealth, power, resources, privileges, benefits, land, access to education, access to opportunity, and they use that to marginalize, subordinate, and do harm to another race of people. This is what racism is. Okay. What happens is oftentimes the people who benefit from racism don't want to admit it exists. This is what happens oftentimes. All right, so we'll talk about that study. TheHill.com is a good article about that. And when I was on Roland Martin Unfiltered a couple of weeks ago, that was one of the topics we were going to discuss but ran out of time. So we'll deal with that. And then on our Sunday night show, and then also last Friday, we talked about Tulsa, Oklahoma. We talked about Tulsa, Oklahoma, and the search in Tulsa for remains of victims of the 1921 race massacre there in the North Tulsa, where African Americans lived, and also in their business district, the Greenwood district, also called Black Wall Street. Well, there is an effort in Florida to seek reparations for the descendants of the Election Day massacre in Ocoee, Florida, that took place in November 1920. Ocoee Massacre of 1920, descendants may receive reparations for this Election Day attack. All right, so we'll talk about that. That's a recent development which ties into history, and it's a good story to understand because these African Americans were attacked and killed for voting. These African 1920. This is the year after World War I. This is the year after World War I ended, and I'm sorry, 2 years after World War I ended, and this is the year after the Red Summer of 1919, when you had 26 major race riots in this country, over 25 major race riots in this country, and you had African Americans protecting their communities, and a lot of retired World War I veterans protecting their communities against white supremacists coming in and attacking us. All right. Then in 1920, you have this Ocoee Massacre, 1920, and then in 1921, you have the attack on Black Wall Street, the attack on the Greenwood District, North Tulsa, in Tulsa, Oklahoma. 1923, you have the Rosewood Massacre in Florida. Okay, the Rosewood Massacre in Florida. So you have to understand this chronology of history. All right, you have to understand this chronology of history, and now we see some type of reckoning with this type of history. We see searching for remains of victims of the 1921 massacre in Black Wall Street. We see seeking reparations for the descendants of the massacre in Florida. All right, now Florida is also where Trayvon Martin was killed, in Sanford, Florida. All right, that's where Trayvon Martin was killed, also in Sanford, Florida. And then lastly, I want to deal with this story. Now, I did a separate presentation about this. I'm not sure if we talked about this on our show at all. I did a separate presentation dealing with this. There was a study that came out in September from Citigroup Bank that deals with how racism has cost the U.S. $16 trillion. Racism has cost the U.S. $16 trillion in 20 years. Okay, and this ties into little Jared, his idiotic comments, uninformed comments. But now keep in mind, little Jared is a senior advisor to Donald Trump. Now he's totally unqualified to be in that position. Just the fact that he owes Deutsche Bank just the fact that he owes Deutsche Bank $285 million means that he should not have a security clearance. Okay, and when the FBI did the did the background check, they recommended that he not get a security clearance, but he got one anyway. Who decided he should have a security clearance? Okay. So you sit back and you look at, once again, he's the poster boy for white privilege. So we'll talk about those topics and more on the African History Network show. Now, on the African History Network show, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world. Because right now, it's corrects wrong behavior. What you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. What you think about yourself is based upon what you have been taught about yourself. What you've been taught about yourself is based upon everything you've read, heard, and seen about yourself. So when you control the radius of a man's thoughts, you can control the circumference of his actions, because the mind can't do or teach what it doesn't know. Now, we deal with a number of different topics here. We deal with current events and history, politics, education, economic empowerment, entrepreneurship, relationships, love, sex, health issues, and much, much more. Sign up for our email newsletter. Text the word KEMET, K-E-M-E-T, to 22828. To sign up for our email newsletter, text the word KEMET, K-E-M-E-T, to 22828. To sign up for our email newsletter. Also visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. All right, the calling number is 313-778-7600, 313-778-7600. It's the calling number if you have a question or comment. All right, and then we should be broadcasting on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network, and also my YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, I-M-H-O-T-E-P, on YouTube. So everybody watching us on our social media platforms, share this broadcast, please, on your social media platforms as well. You can donate to the African History Network, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, $ the AHN Show through Cash App. Then also through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN Show, paypal.me/the AHN Show. All right, I know we're coming up here on the break in just a minute. Let me see. Okay, when we come back, we'll go to this clip. When we come back from the break, we'll go to this clip also. Let's look at a brief recap of what's going on right now. Now, 62 million people have already early voted across the country. It's estimated that it can be as many as 100 million by election day, roughly twice the number who cast early ballots in 2016. Now, with 8 days until the election, Vice President Mike Pence held a rally in the battleground state of Minnesota today after at least 5 of his aides tested positive for COVID-19. Now, based upon coronavirus standards, based upon CDC standards, Mike Pence should be quarantining. But, you know, just like Honey Badger don't care, Mike Pence don't care. Okay? They keep holding these super spreader events. They do not care, neither does Donald Trump. Okay? And I'm telling you right now, they're going to have hell to pay. You already have, when we look at the updates from Washington Post, New York Times, NBC News, dealing with coronavirus, okay? Pence puts others at risk by campaigning after coronavirus exposure, experts say. Now, despite his possible exposure to coronavirus, Vice President Mike Pence crisscrossed the country in recent days, keeping up a campaign schedule that experts say put those around him at risk. By Monday, October 26th, the number of his aides known to have tested positive for coronavirus had grown to 5, and the Vice President and Mike Pence scrapped plans to preside over the Senate's confirmation of Amy Coney Barrett, all right, ramming this through. They still don't have a coronavirus bill that they passed in the Senate, okay? They still don't have a coronavirus bill they passed in the Senate to help the everyday American citizens, but they're going to ram through this Amy Coney Barrett 8 days before the November 3rd election. They should have hell to pay at the ballot box. But he had already headlined rallies in Florida, North Carolina, and Minnesota. All right, we're coming. Let me see. How much time we have before the break, Shakita? You can just come on here and tell me. Okay, asked whether Pence was endangering others. Okay, she sent a text message. All right, time for break. We'll continue this on the other side of the break. You listen to the African History Network show right here on 910 a.m. the Superstation of Future Radio. I'm Michael Imhotep. 313-778-7600 is the calling number. We'll be back in a few minutes. For 25 years, the Black History 101 Mobile Museum has carried on the rich legacy of the Black Museum movement in America by showcasing original artifacts of the Black experience at colleges, universities, K-12 schools, corporations, libraries, conferences, and cultural events, making it the most traversed Black History mobile exhibit in American history. Dr. Khalid El Hakim is the founder of the Black History 101 Mobile Museum, and he is a highly sought-after public speaker on topics of Black history, social studies, education, museum studies, hip-hop, and race relations. Dr. Khalid was named among the change makers for NBC Universal's Erase the Hate campaign and listed as one of the 100 men of distinction for Black enterprise. He recently founded the Michigan Hip Hop Archive on the campus of Western Michigan University. The Black History 101 Mobile Museum is currently scheduling in-person and virtual exhibits nationwide. For more information, please contact Dr. Khalid Al Hakim directly at 313-645-4197, 313-645-4197, or visit their website at blackhistorymobilemuseum.com. That's blackhistorymobilemuseum.com. You can also email him at bhistory101@yahoo.com, bhistory101@yahoo.com.
Melanized Media is an independently Black-owned and operated film company. We specialize in producing culturally enriching Black films and videos at melanizedmedia.com. Join us every Sunday for Melanized Nights, where we screen a socially conscious documentary film or Black historic presentation. That's every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. Visit melanizedmedia.com to learn more and to register. That's MELANEYES media.com. Peace.
The revolution will not be televised. It will be digitized, coded, and branded. Don't let your young person get left behind. Join Tech Core 2 on Saturday, September 26, 2020 in their 6th straight year, providing tech, STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, coding, and Saturday classes. Tech Core 2's mission is to develop a technology pipeline program for urban youth from kindergarten to college to career entry. Tech Core 2 offers 9 different tech classes for students in grades kindergarten through high school, including computer programming, coding, gaming, hip-hop and STEM, and video production. All classes are online with live instruction. To register or for more information, please visit techcore2.org. That's techcore2.org, or give them a call at 215-879-6701. That's 215-879-6701. Don't forget to grab your $10 discount with promo code TAHN Fall 2020. Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM, the Superstation of Future Radio. Hey, I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Monday, October 26th, 2020, and we're live. Hope everybody's doing well. So we're giving you an update on what's going on with the campaign, what's going on with coronavirus. We're going to get into these comments from these idiotic comments from Jared Kushner, but he's showing how he really thinks. And you know, his father-in-law thinks the same way. All right. I'm telling you right now. So right before the break, we were talking about Mike Pence holding these super spreader events on the campaign trail after 5 of his aides came down with coronavirus. Despite his possible exposure to the coronavirus, Vice President Mike Pence crisscrossed the country in recent days, keeping up a campaign schedule that experts say put those around him at risk. By Monday, October 26th, the number of his aides known to have tested positive for the virus had grown to 5, and the vice president scrapped plans to preside over the Senate's confirmation of Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court that we saw take place today, that charade. All right. And they should have hell to pay at the ballot box, and Democrats should pack the Supreme Court also. OK, this was a straight gangster move. And yeah, I mean, that's what this is. This is a fight for raw, naked power. They don't care. But Republicans don't care about norms. They don't care about justice, morality, none of it. OK, and the Republican senators that voted to confirm Amy Coney Barrett, if they're up for re-election, they need to be voted out of office. Seriously. Some of the, and they're the same ones that voted to acquit Donald Trump in early February in the impeachment trial. They should have hell to pay. They should never hold public office again. Okay. They sold their souls to the devil, and they owe devil change. They sold their souls to the devil, and they owe the devil change. They violated their oath of office. They violated their oath to defend the Constitution against enemies, both foreign and domestic. This is what has happened. All right. So, but he had already, Pence, he had already headline rallies in Florida, North Carolina, and Minnesota, these super spreader events that they're holding. Now, asked whether Vice President Mike Pence was endangering others by campaigning, former Food and Drug Administration Commissioner Scott Gottlieb, Gottlieb, said that, quote, the short answer is yes, end quote. Now, Pence should receive frequent tests, maintain physical distance from others, and wear a medical grade N95 mask at all times, Scott Gottlieb said in an interview Sunday with CBS News. But Pence is not going to do that. All right. Now, coronavirus pandemic is reaching deep into the nation's most sparsely populated states and counties, where distance from others has long been part of the appeal, and this year had appeared to be a buffer against the virus. An 18-year-old University of Dayton student died last week of complications from COVID-19 after a lengthy hospitalization, school officials announced. Faculty, staff, and graduate students had been raising concerns for months about the school's reopening plan. In 5 red states, coronavirus cases are surging, yet their leaders have refused to loosen rules on who can vote by mail. Most of the approximately 30 million registered voters who live in Texas, Indiana, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Tennessee have no choice but to cast ballots in person. Let's see here. Okay. Now, a record-setting second wave of coronavirus infections sweeps Europe. Italy is imposing its harshest pandemic restrictions since the spring. Check out the updates from Washington Post. Also, we see 71,000 new cases reported today in the U.S. We're at 8.7 million reported cases in the U.S., 226,000 deaths. There is a Washington Post has a article dealing with the hospitals in nearly every region report a flood of COVID-19 patients. This will probably be worse than the second wave. Okay. Let's pull this up. Hospitals in every region of the country report
are being overrun. Okay, so check that out also. All right, now when we look at Michigan, we look at WXYZ Channel 7 for an update on what's going on. Also, we'll pull that back up. We see Michigan has 161,907 confirmed cases and 7,271 confirmed deaths. The state reported on Monday, October 26th, the state reported a 2-day increase of 3,881 cases and 29 deaths. Between the 2 days, the average number of new confirmed cases is 1,940 per day, the state said. Governor Gretchen Whitmer said that if hospitals begin to get overwhelmed as COVID-19 cases increase once again, Michigan could take a step backwards. Check out the updates at WXYZ.com, Channel 7 News here in Detroit, WXYZ.com. All right. I want to go to this clip here. We're going to go to a clip of Barack Obama, Shakita. Saturday, President Barack Obama was in Miami, okay? And he's on the campaign trail, and he was talking about how Donald Trump could not answer a basic question in his interview with Leslie Stahl that Donald Trump walked out of like a bully, like a little punk. If Donald Trump is afraid of Leslie Stahl, how's he going to deal with Vladimir Putin? How's he going to deal with Erdogan? How's he going to deal with dictators if he's afraid of Leslie Stahl? We have that clip queued up, Shakita. All right, what is this? Okay, let's go to the clip.
Former president, again, did not hold back. He went on the attack again against President Trump on everything from the pandemic and healthcare, the economy, to America's standing in the world.
Yeah, Anna, this speech was just as much about promoting his own vice president as it was taking on the current president. But President Obama didn't hold back in his criticism of President Trump taking on his approach to the coronavirus, and even talking about the president's behavior, comparing it to an internet meme, saying that Florida man doesn't even act that way, that the president's behavior is not normal. And you also heard President Obama kind of mock the president for his 60 Minutes interview that ended, that he walked out of, and also some of that anti-media rhetoric that you've heard at times from the president. President Obama today essentially saying that if you walk out of a 60 Minutes interview, or if you're complaining about the type of coverage that you're getting, that you're not going to be able to stand up to dictators and people like Vladimir Putin. Take a listen to a bit more of what Obama had to say here in Florida.
During the debate, Trump was asked, what is your plan for the new phase of COVID? Which is a pretty good question, considering that we just saw the highest number of cases spike up yesterday. So you'd think he'd be ready for a response. Instead, he just said it wasn't his fault, he didn't have one. He said it's now gone in a bunch of states. Just as states are reaching new record highs nationwide. He doesn't have a plan. He doesn't even acknowledge the reality of what's taking place all across the country. And it gets better, because he also sat down with 60 Minutes. He was asked, what's your priority in your second term? And let me say, I've run for president in Miami, so I just want you to know it's a good idea to have an answer to this question. It's a good idea, if you're running for re-election, to say, here's what I want to accomplish. What did Trump say? He got mad and walked out of the interview. He thought the questions were too tough. Too tough. Miami, listen, if he can't answer a tough question like, what would you like to do in your second term? Then it's our job to make sure he doesn't get a second term.
So this is the second time this week that President Obama really issued another scathing rebuke of his successor. And you also heard the former president kind of take on these arguments from President Trump and Republicans, painting Joe Biden as a socialist or a communist, particularly here in the state of Florida. Obama said that Biden is not a secret socialist, that they shouldn't believe that type of garbage that is coming from Republicans, the way that the former president took it as he is trying to defend his former vice president. Now, one of Obama's central messages here today in Florida was to make a plan to early vote. The Biden campaign really believes that President Obama can help mobilize Black men, Latinos, and young voters to get out there in these next 10 days before the election. The former president telling everyone to make a plan to either vote early in person or by mail-in ballot as this election gets closer and closer. Anna.
All right. So that was from CNN from Saturday. That was October 24th. Check out that clip from CNN. Obama, this basic question was too tough for Trump. At CNN.com, Obama, this basic question was too tough for Trump. All right, check that out. We're going to go to the next clip. Shakita. So Friday, October 23rd, I think it was, I was on Roland Martin Unfiltered as a panelist. I'm on every Friday now. Also, Roland will be in Detroit on Wednesday. I'm still waiting to find out the location. He'll be broadcasting from Detroit on Wednesday. So when I find out location, I'll let you all know. We discussed, let's see, in this segment here, we discussed Florida. He was broadcasting for Florida and he was interviewing Desmond Meade. Desmond Meade led the initiative to get Amendment 4 on the ballot in Florida to restore voting rights to 1.4 million ex-offenders, okay, or returning citizens, because Florida is one of the few states where if you have a felony conviction, you lose your voting rights for life, okay, and that dates back to sometime after, shortly after the 15th Amendment of 1870. Okay, so he was discussing this with Desmond Meade, and then he threw it over to me. Let's go to this clip, Shakita.
That all that time he was really jealous of people that were voting. He was really jealous of that. Just think about that. And so he voted for the first time in his life. You have so many people that's doing that, age of 71, 78, in their 60s that have never voted before. And so these are stories of returning citizens throughout the state of Florida, actually throughout the country, right? The sleeping giant have awakened.
Reverend Dr. William Barber has talked about that. He's talked about the poor, 75 million who did not vote. 91 million total did not vote in 2016. That's eligible to vote. Now we start talking about those who are incarcerated. And you have people in this country who still want to keep them in prison. I say it's a prison without shackles. Saying, "Oh, you did your time, but now all of a sudden, you still can't vote." Since y'all passed Amendment 4, have you seen an even greater intensity pick up across the country? Folks who now realize that's not the way to go. The governor of Iowa, Republican, restored the voting rights as well. She, Republicans didn't want to do it, but she said this is the right thing to do.
And with no fines and fees requirement.
Right.
With no fines and fees requirement. And we've seen, we got our brothers and sisters in California right now. They have Prop 17 that's on the ballot that would extend the franchise to people while they're on parole or probation. You're seeing efforts in Kentucky. You have returning citizens that are leading the effort to help register folks that have been reenfranchised by the governor there. And so, yes, it is a growing movement throughout the country, and more people are understanding that the only people that don't want people with felony convictions to vote are the people that are taking that position for purely political reasons. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. When you have Maine and Vermont, which ironically the majority of that population don't look like me and you, right? But in Maine and Vermont, they could vote from prison and jail, and that's never been an issue. And I think that we could go as far as that, right? I think that no one should ever lose their rights, right? I have 4 sons, and they do some stupid things every now and then, but no matter what they do, they never stop being my sons. When you strip voting rights away from a person, you basically strip them of their citizenship. We're not relegated to second-class citizenship status. And so I don't think a person should ever lose their citizenship, and we should always be able to have our voices heard. You're counting us for the census. You're making money off of it. We're paying taxes, so why can't we vote?
Absolutely. Again, 24 states, 24 locations all across Florida, but also you said 13 other states?
No, man, you shortchanged us, man.
Over 30
cities in the
I want you to repeat it.
There are over 13 states in the country and 27 cities in the country, and folks are really showing up. I think it's so beautiful because, you know, as a person that's been through recovery, one of the things I learned in Alcoholics Anonymous is that the most important person in the room is that person that just got off the street, that person that just got sober. And right now at polling locations all across this country, the most important voter at that polling location are those first-time voters, people who have gotten their rights restored, people who have never voted. And we need to make sure that that experience is not a traumatic experience, but a lively, exciting experience. And that's why we throw it down, man. We don't have a big party, right? Because we need them to know that voting is something that they should want to do and enjoy doing rather than feeling it's a task that they have.
Last thing for you, which one of the cameras he should look into? I want you to look into that camera. There's a brother who's watching. There's a sister who's watching. They got friends who they know. They got family members who say, voting is a waste of my time. I'm not, is chooser of the lesser evil. They're coming up with all these excuses. How long did you not have your right to vote?
I haven't voted. This is the first time I voted in over 30 years and the first ever presidential election that I'm voting in.
So for that person who's watching who says, man, I ain't trying to hear all that.
Man, first of all, let me tell you, if your vote didn't matter, you wouldn't have so many people trying so hard to stop you from voting. There is some value there. But even when you talk about that people are not paying attention to your issues, I can't pay attention to your issues if I don't even know you're there. And the only reason people are going to know you're there is when you show up to the polls and vote. That's when that power manifests itself. But as long as you stay home, as long as you're making excuses, then guess what? You will always experience these issues that we're experiencing today. And another thing, don't get caught up in the candidates, right? There's no such thing as a perfect candidate, but you should be going to vote for the most important person, and that is you and the one you love. You talk about you'll fight for the one you love. You're willing to die for the one you love. You need to ask yourself, are you willing to vote for the one you love? Because if you don't, there's going to be somebody's neck on yours pretty soon.
That's with me. I appreciate it, my brother. Look forward to the event tomorrow.
Listen, I'm looking forward to having you, man. We turning up.
All right, then. Desmond, I appreciate it. Thanks a bunch. And, of course, y'all, I will be rocking my Let My People Vote shirt tomorrow. We're going to be live streaming the event. It starts at what time tomorrow?
2 o'clock.
We're going to be live streaming the event on Rolling Unfiltered tomorrow, 2 p.m. Y'all want to let everybody know we'll be right here. So, Desmond, we appreciate it. Thank you so very much. Michael, I want to start with you. The point that Desmond made right there. Again, there are brothers and sisters out there, especially brothers who say, man, this is a waste of my time. But the reality is you can't change anything. You can't change anything in this country without public policy. So you can't say, I want to see stuff change if you don't vote for the folk who are in position to actually change stuff.
Well, Roland, politics is the legal distribution of scarce wealth, power, and resources, and the right of the law. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
All right. You're live.
Okay,
Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, politics is the legal distribution of scarce wealth, power, and resources, and the writing of laws, statutes, ordinances, amendments, and treaties, the adoption, interpretation, and enforcement. So politics impacts every aspect of our life, from the water we drink to the air we breathe to the food we eat. When we look at the protesters over George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery, you have to have people in office to properly respond to your demands and your protests. Well, how did they get in office? Okay, they were elected in the office, or they were appointed by somebody who was elected. And then the other part of this, Roland, as you talk about, is that on the other side of the election, we have to have the engagement. And we also have to understand how oftentimes we're financing our own dehumanization. When you did the State of Black America and you had Reverend Al Sharpton as one of your guests, Reverend Al Sharpton talked about how money managers take our pension fund dollars and loan them to real estate developers. The real estate developers come into our communities and gentrify us out of our communities with our own dollars. So oftentimes we don't know that we can contact our money managers, find out where our pension fund dollars are invested in, and redirect them into other areas that are not doing us harm. So on the other side of voting, we also have to leverage our economics to enforce our politics, as one of my teachers, Dr. Claude Anderson, would say if he were here right now.
I want to now go to Dr. Carter. Again, I keep trying to explain to people, voting is not the solution. It is a part of the solution. And I get people out there who have grown frustrated when others have said, you got to vote, you got to vote, you got to vote, as if that was the only thing you have to do. It's not the only thing you have to do to change our communities, but it's something, Dr. Carter, you got to do if you do want to see change in our neighborhood.
Hey, Shakita, pause the clip, please.
Absolutely. I think Michael's point is exactly.
Thanks. All right. Watch that full broadcast, Roland Martin on Facebook and Roland Martin on YouTube. That is from Friday, October 23rd, 2020. The full show is there. Okay. The panel was on for the first hour. All right. Now, for people like Melanated that want to post this nonsense here on the thread, okay, what is our vote getting us? If you don't know by now, where the hell have you been? We went through and broke down for 6 weeks. We dealt with policy. We dealt with Biden's plan. We dealt with understanding everything from the George Floyd Police and Justice Act, understanding raising the federal minimum wage from $7.25 an hour to $15 an hour. We dealt with Saving the Affordable Health Care Act. We've dealt with policy. We compared those policies to Donald Trump's policies. We broke down Donald Trump's Fool's Gold plan. We've been dealing with coronavirus. 41% of Black-owned businesses have been wiped out since April. Now it's probably 50% of Black-owned businesses. You've got 226,000 people dead. 20% of them are African Americans. Okay, so if you don't know, then you haven't been watching the show. We've been dealing with policy. So I don't know where the hell you've been, but okay. Anyway, it's interesting when people you come on here with this nonsense. What you're saying is you have not been doing the research. That's what you're saying, because we've been dealing with this. All right. Anyway, so if we go back to coronavirus quickly, Dr. Fauci says U.S. still in first wave as cases surge to new records. Now, some people say we're in a third wave. Dr. Fauci says we're still in the first wave. Read the reporting from NBC News, NBC Nightly News, and read their reporting there at NBCnews.com. Dr. Fauci gave a grim assessment of the coronavirus pandemic in the U.S. after the country set back-to-back records for daily cases in recent days. I look at it more as an elongated and exacerbation of the original first wave, said Fauci of the surges in an interview with Yahoo Finance. We've really never cleared and got down to a very low baseline. No matter how you look at it, it's good news. On Friday, the U.S. reported nearly 80,000 new cases, a staggering new single-day benchmark as the pandemic accelerates beyond levels we haven't seen since the summer. The U.S. has recorded more than 8.7 million cases with a death toll of more than 226,000, according to the latest NBC News tally. After rampaging through cities, the virus is now ravaging many smaller rural communities. All right. So you can't open back up the economy. You can't open back up the economy until you get coronavirus under control. Okay. This is what people don't understand. All right. You can't open back up the economy until you get coronavirus under control. To do that, you have to get coronavirus under control. You have to have somebody competent in office who will listen to the scientists and actually has a plan to deal with coronavirus. All right. So this is part of the problem. All right. So check that out. And then also look at the article here. We'll post a link here. Hospitals in nearly every region report a flood of COVID-19 patients. Hospitals in every region report a flood of COVID-19 patients. OK, but you can't get that under control until you get another coronavirus bill passed through Congress. The $3.4 trillion HEROES Act passed the House of Representatives in mid-May 2020. I think it was May 15th, 2020. Is stuck in the Senate. OK, that the bill that Democrats in the House passed had funding to help hospitals. OK, and also funding for states, because a lot of states are being crushed by the weight of being crushed by the weight of paying unemployment insurance. And many states, because of the state constitution and because of various laws that have been passed in the states, have to have a balanced budget. They can't run a deficit like the federal government can. Okay, so they need to be bailed out by the federal government. They need funding. All right, so check out this article here from the Washington Post. All right, let's continue here. So Jared Kushner made some comments today on Fox and Friends, of all places. They're not really friends, but it's called Fox and Friends. Whose friends are they? You ever ask yourself that question? Fox and Friends, whose friends are they? Okay, and they're crazy like a fox or sly like a fox. But if we look at this article here from NBC News, Kushner said Trump's policies can help people break out of the problems that they're complaining about, but he can't want them to be successful more than they want to be successful. He can't want them to be successful more than they want to be successful. Now, Jared Kushner is the poster boy for white privilege. Jared Kushner is the poster boy for white privilege. He has a top level position he's totally unqualified for. He owes Deutsche Bank $285 million. There's no way he should have security clearance or in Deutsche Bank, that type of money. And then when you go through and look at when the application that he filled out for the security clearance, he had to go back a number of times and change the foreign contacts that he had, the foreign relationships that he had. He had to amend that a number of times also. But White House advisor Jared Kushner described Black America's issues with inequality and racism as, quote unquote, complaining in an interview on Monday. Quote, the thing we've seen in the Black community, which is mostly Democrat, he said on Fox and Friends, is that President Trump's policies are the policies that can help people break out of the problems that they're complaining about. But he can't want them to be successful more than they want to be successful. Which policy is he referring to? Donald Trump can't even help poor white people. Donald Trump can't even help poor white people. What the hell is he? What is Jared Kushner talking about? Kushner's words appeared to blame Black America's disproportionate lack of wealth and job opportunities, as well as health disparities and other inequalities, on a lack of drive, suggesting that the problem is that Black Americans don't want success enough. However, his comments did not address the roots of systemic racism. Well, Donald Trump doesn't want to address systemic racism. Donald Trump doesn't really want to, he doesn't want to really deal with the fact that systemic racism exists. In the interview, one of the interviews with Bob Woodward had to press him to admit that systemic racism exists. But Donald Trump really don't want to admit in public. And then when it comes to systemic racism and policing, his attorney general William Barr didn't want to admit systemic racism and policing exists. Quote, this dismissive approach to the issues that Black voters care about is indicative of Trump's callousness and disregard for the lives of Black people. So notice how Trump does not want to deal with how African Americans are disproportionately harmed and disproportionately die from coronavirus. Notice that remember in 2016, he asked Black people, what the hell do you have to lose? And I told you the correct answer is everything. right? Now you're going to have a massive number of evictions and foreclosures that actually starting to hit now, but we're going to see it even more over the next few months, right? They're disproportionately going to negatively impact African Americans. Trump doesn't even want to address that. So Brandon Gassaway, the Democratic National Committee's national press secretary, said this in a statement. This dismissive approach to the issues that black voters care about is indicative of Trump's callousness and disregard for the lives of black people. He said, quote, we cannot afford another 4 years of a White House that does not take our voices seriously and tells us to be grateful for whatever scraps are left over from the bargaining table. All right. So check this out. Now, Kayleigh McEnany, Donald Trump's White House press secretary, who actually caught coronavirus as well. She released a statement and said, quote, it's disgusting to see internet trolls taking senior advisor Jared Kushner out of context as they try to distract from President Donald Trump's undeniable record of accomplishment for the black community from criminal justice reform. So he takes credit for the First Step Act. And we know the Congressional Black Caucus pushed to help to get the First Step Act passed. We talked about this Sunday night and the previous Sunday. But then Trump reversed many of the criminal justice reforms that were put in place by the Obama administration. Stopped doing investigations into the patterns and practices of the police department, nominated 2 attorney generals who are against criminal justice reform. OK, so when you look at the Trump administration has taken a hands-off approach to policing. They reversed President Obama's initiative to abolish privatized prisons and not renew federal contracts with privatized prisons because Trump supports privatized prisons. So he reversed that initiative when he got into office. And then and also Core Civic and Geo Group, 2 of the largest owner-operators of privatized prisons, donated almost $600,000 to Donald Trump's presidential campaign in 2016. They may be donating now. I haven't checked. 2016, they did. All right. And then they got a payoff on the other side because their stock price went up quick, shot up in February 2017 when it was announced that the Trump administration was reversing the Obama administration's initiative to abolish privatized prisons at the federal level. At the state level, because of the 10th Amendment, states have enormous powers. States can still have privatized prisons. OK. All right. We'll continue. Those watching on social media platforms, keep watching. The African History Network on Facebook and Michael Imhotep on YouTube. We're out of time here on 9 10 a.m. Superstation. We're here Monday through Friday, 11 p.m. to midnight, and Sundays 9 to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can donate to the African History Network, the AHN Show, through Cash App and PayPal.me/the AHN Show. Remember, right now, it's correct. Wrong behavior is not over till we win. Wakanda forever. Stay tuned for Michael Baisden, and we'll talk to you tomorrow night. Peace. All right, those on social media, stand by. We're going to continue here. Have you tasted the world famous No Frowny Brownie yet from the Pink Bakery? If not, what are you waiting for? They are vegan, gluten-free, and free of the big 8 allergens. While eating their No Frowny brownies, the fabulous Miss Tabitha Brown said they were very good. Very good. And you know, if she says that, they are. The Pink Bakery is the first black-owned, Big 8 allergen-free baking mix company. Go to thepinkbakery.com, that's thepinkbakery.com, to order their No Frowny Brownie Mix today. Yaya Rule is a line of African print-inspired apparel catered to the black community. The pieces include t-shirts, sweatshirts, hoodies, jackets, dresses, skirts, activewear, bags, and other accessories and home decor. This brand offers a revived way for men and women to wear their black pride and honor their African heritage anywhere at any time. This apparel line is for anyone, whether you are working in the corporate world, are an entrepreneur, or an artist. Their selection will allow you to casually let your pride shine or dress it up as wanted. It is for those who have already embraced African fabrics and for those who are just getting introduced to them. Reclaim and experience a part of our culture with rich and colorful African prints. The clothing line and the accessories are available right now starting at $17.99. For more information on the new items and accessories, visit YaYaRule.com. Alkebulan's lifestyle attitude is servitude. They focus on providing you quality products and customer service. They're here to fulfill your African men's and women's clothing, accessories, health and beauty products, essential oils and fragrances, hair care products, and much, much more. Check out their collection of clothing and products for African kings and queens. Visit their website, alkebulanlife.com, ALKEBULAN, alkebulanlife.com. They look forward to serving you. All right, how's everybody doing? All right, so we're here on 910 a.m. the Superstation for 1 hour, Monday through Friday, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. And we'll continue here. All right, we'll get to these other topics, but I wanted to get that clip, a couple clips in, and we want to deal with some of this information, give you a synopsis of what's been taking place today. All right. So Trump takes credit for HBCU funding that was Representative Alma Adams' bill. Okay. Member of the Congressional Black Caucus. There was a veto-proof majority in the House and the Senate to get that bill passed for the funding for historically Black colleges and universities. Donald Trump takes full credit for all of that. Okay. He takes full credit for all that. He doesn't take responsibility for coronavirus, but he takes full credit for HBCU funding. Okay, so that's Kayleigh McEnany running her mouth. Now, according to a study last year by McKinsey & Company, a management consulting firm, the racial wealth gap between African Americans and white families has been widening for decades, in part because white family wealth has continued to grow while that of Black families has stagnated. Okay, so Trump doesn't want to deal with the systemic racism that caused the racial wealth gap. He doesn't want to deal with the racial pay gap between African Americans and white people. He doesn't want to deal with that at all. Trump's reelection campaign has been okay. So when we look at $16 trillion, I did a separate broadcast dealing with this. There was a study from Citigroup. There's a study from Citigroup Bank. This article came out September 23rd, 2020. This ties into this. So these next two topics here tie right into Jared Kushner. All right. Racism has cost the U.S. $16 trillion over the past 20 years, not since 1865. Okay. When the Civil War ended and chattel slavery ended, not since 1877 when Reconstruction ended. Okay. Not since 1945 when World War II ends. All right. Not since 1970 at the end of the Great Migration. Okay. No, since the year 2000. America could have been $16 trillion richer if not for inequities in education, housing, wages, and business investment between African American and white Americans over the past 20 years, new research concludes. America could have been $16 trillion richer if not for inequities in education, housing, wages, and business investment between African Americans and white Americans over the past 20 years, new research concludes. The study released by Citigroup in September 2020 is the latest in a body of research that attempts to quantify the economic impact of systemic racism that Trump and a lot of Trumpites are in denial exists. Okay, this study is the latest in a body of research that attempts to quantify the economic impact of systemic racism. Citigroup arrived at its $16 trillion figure after estimating that African Americans have lost $113 billion in potential wages over the past 2 decades because they could not get a college degree. African Americans lost $113 billion in potential wages over the past 2 decades because they could not get a college degree. So when we talk about making college affordable, and if you come from a household that makes $125,000 or less, you can go to college for free. That saves African Americans a lot of debt from going to college. When you can come out of college largely debt free, in general, as long as you don't screw up with credit cards, things like this, in general, you're going to have a better credit rating. You can get a car at a lower interest rate. You can buy a home when you're ready to buy a home at a lower interest rate, save money. You can, in general, most likely buy a home sooner. Okay. Because a lot of people coming out of college, a lot of African Americans coming out of college, they have a lot of college debt. They may not be able to take on the responsibility of a home at that point in time. Now, the housing market lost $218 billion in sales because African American applicants could not get home loans. The housing market lost $218 billion in sales because African Americans could not get home loans. All right. Now, about $13 trillion in business revenue never flowed into the economy because African American entrepreneurs could not access bank loans. So this deals with economic empowerment. Everybody likes to talk about, but very few people understand. Now, I'm familiar with my degrees in business administration. I managed companies where we employed African Americans, had contracts with the city of Detroit, county of Wayne, state of Michigan. Okay. I won contracts with the county of Wayne, bid on contracts, the whole bidding on government contracts, things like that. I know that process. Okay. I got, it was my responsibility to get us to become a authorized vendor of the state of Michigan, because a lot of times people don't know to bid on government contracts. Usually you have to be, whether city government, county or state government or federal, usually you first have to become a authorized vendor of that government entity before you can even bid on contracts, which is a screening process, providing tax returns. They usually come out and do a site visit to the business. It's a whole process to like verify your business before you can even bid on the contract. All right. But so a lot of our businesses get knocked out of that because their paperwork isn't correct. They can't even get to this. They can't even get to the point to becoming a authorized vendor of a municipality because their paperwork isn't in order. Not necessarily they can't do the work. Now, they may not have the capital to do the work, because we managed the construction project. Okay, so I was managing the general contracting company also. So they and to be quite honest, what we had to do, the real talk, what we had to do to be able to before, because money was being held up from the city. Money was being held up from the city. So what we did was, my girlfriend at the time was a white collar worker with Ford, and she made us a 90-day short-term loan from her 401k plan and loaned us money so we could make payroll and handle day-to-day expenses while we wait on this money coming from the city of Detroit. We had a line of credit with the bank, but we tapped that also. This is real talk. This is stuff they don't teach in the textbooks. This is real talk. This is why I never talk about people working on a plantation. That's some bullshit right there. You need people that got steady income. You need people that got jobs. You will never hear me criticize people that got a 9-to-5. You're going to need them. When you can't get money from the bank, you're going to have to go to them because they got better credit. They have 401k plans. They got pensions. They can tap into money. You got a lot of people out here running this bullshit on our people and talking about you going to work at the plantation. Let me tell you something. I've been studying history for 28 years. You going to work and getting a 401k plan and getting health benefits and getting a 2-week vacation. I've read slave narratives. That shit ain't slavery. We need to stop lying to our people. And not only that, when let's look at General Motors, for instance, right? Do black people buy General Motors cars? Then if we buy General Motors cars, that means that the money we spend for the cars pays for the jobs that people at General Motors have, right? Then shouldn't we have jobs at all different levels in General Motors? Because we pay for their health care plan, we pay for their 401k plan, we pay for their stock purchase plan, we pay for the discounts they get on the cars, we pay for their 2-week vacation. So if we buy cars with General Motors and we pay for all that, shouldn't we have jobs at all different levels with General Motors? If we have jobs at all different levels with General Motors, then that gives us steady income that we can redirect to African-American owned businesses and help them out. See, this is stuff they don't teach in business school. I've been to business school. They don't teach this shit. I'm telling you right now. You need people with steady income. You need people with white collar jobs. You need people with blue collar jobs, because you're going to have to go to them to get money when you can't get money from the banks. You're going to have to go to people who can tap into a 401k plan, short term, loan you $25,000, loan you $30,000. Okay, that's real talk. All right. So I never attack people or make fun of people that got a 9-to-5 job. If you in business, you gonna need them. Okay. So, and you can have a 9-to-5 and still run businesses. All right. You can have a 9-to-5 still run. It's not an either or, because what one of my former college professors who I went to work for, he's teaching at Wayne State, and he and his partners, they all had 9-to-5 jobs there in corporate America, things like that. And then they paid, I think it was his cousin or brother-in-law, one of them, to be the general manager to run the company. It's not an either or. Okay, two checks is better than one. So a lot of this stuff people are running on our people dealing with entrepreneurship, economic empowerment, to be quite honest with you, is really economic empowerment for them. Because I taught entrepreneurship for 7 years. First thing I taught my students is don't quit your day job. I'm telling you right now, don't do that. Don't quit your day job. You're going to need steady income, because most businesses don't make a profit. About 50% of businesses don't make a profit to their third year in business. Your business ain't most likely is not going to be able to pay you a salary. You're going to need steady income. You're going to need health insurance. If you have kids, you're going to need health insurance for your children. You're going to need steady income. Your business is not going to be able to afford you yet, because you're going to have to constantly reinvest. But when people are trying to, a lot of this stuff, man, I see a whole lot of stuff dealing with entrepreneurship, things like this, man. Game recognizes game. A lot of this is economic empowerment for them and their family. They may mean well, but I'm telling you, the first thing I tell my students when I was teaching, don't quit your day job. Because a lot of people say, like, a lot of people listen to Michael Basin. I like Michael Basin. A lot of people listen to Michael Basin's show, and he, like, years ago, he had the segment, live your dreams or something like that. A lot of people say, I want to quit my job and start a business. First question I ask them is, why you want to quit your job and start a business? Because a lot of people want to start a business because they hate their job. Okay. Being a business owner ain't for everybody. I'm telling you right now, it's some gut wrenching stuff. It's not for everybody. Okay. Maybe the solution is to find a better job. Why would you jump out of the frying pan into a towering inferno? Because if you're a business owner, you're going to work 70, 80 hours a week, maybe more, especially starting out. So is the solution to quit your job and start a business? Okay. Now you may have a part-time business and work a full-time job, but you may want a better job. But if you hate your job, the solution may not be to quit your job and start a business. Solution may be to find a better job that you like, a career, something you can use. Yeah, that ain't the dude, being an entrepreneur ain't for everybody. There's some gut wrenching stuff. All right. So let's continue here. Let's go back to this article here from cbsnews.com. But I see a lot of people, running that game. And it's like they really don't fully understand this. Okay. I've seen it all. I mean, the hardest thing to do is try to run a black-owned business during a recession. That's extremely tough. All right. I've seen one of the partners die of cancer. I've seen the recession hit Detroit. Businesses close up. Buyouts from the auto industry. All that stuff. Okay. So a lot of times when people are promoting entrepreneurship, okay, and own your own business, stuff like that, they ain't talking about like when times are tough. They're talking about when times are good. Okay. All right. Let me pull up this article here from CBS News. And one of the things I recommend people do, if you want to start a business, you want to be a business owner, go to like a local community college, take at least one entrepreneurship class, because it'll save you thousands of dollars in experience. It'll save you thousands of dollars in mistakes if you take at least one entrepreneurship class. Okay, even if you have a degree in business administration, because business administration does not necessarily prepare you to be an entrepreneur. It prepares you to work in a business or maybe manage a business. Okay, I took entrepreneurship classes at Wayne State's business school also. So they had business classes, and then they had entrepreneurship classes, which is a totally different mindset. Let's look at this article. I'm going to pull this up here so you can actually see it. We'll turn on the screen share. Let's see here. Okay. All right. And if you like this type of information, also, you can donate to the African History Network, $ TheAHNShow through Cash App, $ TheAHNShow through Cash App, and also through PayPal, paypal.me/TheAHNShow. So that helps out. That really helps out a lot being that we're here. Really helps out a lot being that we're here 6 days a week instead of 1 day. All right. Is this screen share on? Let's see. Can we see this? All right. Let's turn it on. There we go. Let's blow this up. Okay, this is the article from CBS News, and other outlets have this article also. Is this the right one? Okay. Yeah, racism has cost the U.S. 16 trillion Citigroup fines. This is from September 23rd, 2020. All right, let's continue here. So, Black workers have lost 113 billion in potential wages over the past 2 decades. The housing market lost 218 billion in sales because black applicants could not get home loans. Black applicants could not get home loans. Now, this is for buying homes. Okay, and one of the main ways that people accumulate wealth in this country is through home ownership. So this is locking African Americans out of home ownership, which is a vehicle. One of the vehicles for wealth creation. About 13 trillion in business revenue never flowed. About 13 trillion in business revenue never flowed into the economy because Black entrepreneurs could not access bank loans. Okay. Now, also speaking of wealth, let's see, speaking of wealth and asset, now 2 women who like actually know what the hell they're talking about are Yolanda Spivey and Nicole Compton. All right. And they have a webinar. I'm going to be interviewing them later this week. They have a live webinar coming up Saturday, October 31st. It's Halloween, 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Estate planning and your wealth. We posted a flyer on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, about this today. Estate planning and your wealth. It's your money. We show you how to keep it in the family. It's your money. We show you how to keep it in the family. Yolanda Spivey is an insurance and estate planning. She's an insurance agent, and Nicole Compton is an attorney. So they deal with insurance and estate planning made simple and presented by Yolanda Spivey and Nicole Compton. Visit their website, estateplanning.school, estateplanning.school, for more information. All right. And we're going to interview them also. Okay, let's continue here. Oh, you know what? Let me turn this off. All right, yeah. So that's coming up Saturday, October 31st. Okay. All right, so let's continue here. All right, now what's more, the U.S. could have $5 trillion in gross domestic product over the next 5 years if those gaps and others were closed today, the study indicated. What's more, the U.S. could have $5 trillion in gross domestic product over the next 5 years if those gaps and others were closed today, the study indicated. So the GDP, gross domestic product, is the total amount of the total value of all the goods and services produced by an economy, produced by a country, but also the total value of the income earned in that country as well. Okay, so gross domestic product is three components, made up of three components. Quote, racial inequality has always had an outsized cost that was thought to be paid only by underrepresented groups. Citigroup banking chair Raymond McGuire said in a statement. What this report underscores is that this tariff is levied on all of us. What this report underscores is that this tariff is levied on all of us. So what this report is showing is the cost, that how it is showing how racism impacts everybody in this country. Because see, a lot of people will turn a blind eye on conditions because they perceive racism as only hurting other people. And they perceive themselves as being the beneficiaries of racism. And to a certain extent, they are. But this study shows how racism is negatively impacting everybody and how it's costing the entire economy. America could have been $16 trillion richer if not for inequalities in education, housing, wages, and business investment between African Americans and white Americans. All right, so this is a very important study. So when we deal with laws and policies, and how policies address conditions, etc., the laws and the policies need to be based upon the studies, based upon the evidence. All right, let's continue here. Okay, so Federal Reserve data showed that white households net grew 43% to 61,200 between 1995 and 2016, while it remained flat at 35,500 for black families. Okay, Federal Reserve data showed that white households net worth grew 43% to $61,200 between 1995 and 2016, while it remained flat at 35,400 for black families. Moody's investors found that 44% of black households own their homes in 2019, compared to 74% of white households. Okay, so we have to really address home ownership among African Americans. So when we look at policies, we went through and broke down all 6 parts of Joe Biden's plan to empower Black America. That's his 22-page agenda. We dealt with that May through June of this year, because his plan came out May 4th, 2020, and then we just went through and did 6 weeks again, breaking it down on our Sunday night show. So Sunday before last, we just finished that. So you can go back and watch all of those. Okay, so when people ask, what are we getting for our vote, we go through and break down policies and deal with how all these policies impact our conditions. Okay, so I don't know where the hell people been. I really don't. I'm sorry, I don't. Okay, so read the rest of this article also, and then a McKinsey study released last year explored how these and other inequities have reduced the nation's wealth. The nation's GDP, the total value of goods and services, could be up to 6% higher by 2028 if the racial wealth gap is closed, the consulting firm concluded lawmakers must pass targeted policies that boost household income for Black Americans in order to address the issue. Lawmakers must pass targeted policies that boost household income for Black Americans. One step in that direction is not the only thing. One step in that direction is raising the federal minimum wage from $7.25 an hour to $15 an hour. $15 an hour is not a ceiling, it's a floor. The last time the federal minimum wage was raised was in 2010. That was 10 years ago. Okay. All right. So check out this article here from cbsnews.com. And I did a hour and 10-minute broadcast dealing with that topic. Also check out the article from blackpast.org that then ties into policies. This deals with the National Advisory Commission on Civil Disorders, the Kerner Commission report that was commissioned July 28, 1967 and came out in March 1968. That's under the Lyndon Johnson administration. Okay, check out that article as well. And we'll pull this up here. Let's see here. That's at blackpast.org. Blackpast.org has about 6,000 pages of articles dealing with African-American history and African history. Kerner Commission report, because the Kerner Commission report is important because it was a study of 23 cities in 1967-68 to look at the rebellions that were taking place, like Detroit Rebellion, different things like this, and why the rebellions were taking place. Okay. And let's see, can we pull this article up here? Okay. This one right here. This is an extremely important article. 1967 Advisory Commission on Civil Disorders, Kerner Commission report. When we look at this, and I've done a presentation on this also. The National Advisory Commission on Civil Disorders was organized by President Johnson July 28, 1967 to investigate the urban rebellions erupting in cities across the nation between 1964 and 67. The findings of the 7-month study were published in March of 1968. The 11-member commission, more commonly known as the Kerner Commission, after its chairman, Governor Otto Kerner of Illinois, concluded that the United States was, quote, moving toward two societies, one black, one white, separate and unequal. Okay, so they wanted to address, President Johnson wanted them to answer 3 questions, okay, the commission. When it came to the rebellions that were taking place, he wanted to know what happened, why did it happen, and what can be done to prevent it from happening again. What happened, why did it happen, and what can be done to prevent it from happening again. So they surveyed 23 cities where rebellions were taking place, all right? And it was commissioned the day after the rebellion in Detroit ended, which was July 27th, 1967. So if we go down here, it said answering what can be done, let's see here, in responding to why the rebellions occurred. The Kerner report pointed to African Americans' frustration and feelings of powerlessness. Let me see. Can you all read this? How's this coming through? Can you all read this? Let me see. Do I need to blow this up? How's the text? Is it large enough? Can you all read it? Let's see. Let's increase the font size. Let's zoom in on this. Just a second. All right, is that better? Okay, in responding to why the rebellions occurred, the Kerner report pointed to African Americans' frustration and feelings of powerlessness regarding extremely high rates of unemployment and underemployment. poverty, police brutality, and inadequate public services. The report continued that a largely poor Black population was confined to the central cities while a predominantly white population moved out, and that the racism of white Americans was, quote, essentially responsible for the explosive mixture, end quote, leading to the uprisings. The report continued that a largely poor Black population was confined to the central cities while a predominantly white population moved out, and that the racism of white Americans was, quote, essentially responsible for the explosive mixture, end quote, leading to the uprisings. Now, answering the question of what can be done to prevent this in the future, the commission suggested that the federal government intervene to improve housing, improve education, improve employment opportunities, and improve social services for African Americans. Also, to dismantle discriminatory practices in education, discriminatory practices in employment, in the police force and criminal court system. So they're basically talking about addressing systemic racism that Donald Trump is in denial of, and it appears Jared Kushner is in denial of also. The report is basically saying the report came out March of 1968, is basically saying you have to address systemic racism, okay? To dismantle discriminatory practices in education, employment, the police force, and criminal court systems. President Johnson accepted the report but did not support the conclusions, and minimal efforts were made to address the problems identified by the commission. Now, something very important to understand, and we'll post this link here, is that at the same time, it is true he was dealing with the Vietnam War, and the Vietnam War took a lot of attention away from our issues. And in March of 1967, Dr. King was interviewed by NBC News. It was a 26-minute interview, and it's called something to the effect of Beyond Civil Rights, Black Power. Beyond Civil Rights, Black Power. And Dr. King is talking about the next phase of the civil rights movement. And in that interview, and we've played it on our show before, our Sunday night show. In that interview, he talked about how because of the Vietnam War taking place, it's much harder to draw attention to civil rights issues. Okay. And how it drew attention away from it. But the Kerner Commission report is something that has to be revisited because they did the investigation. They laid it all out and said what was the cause and how to address it. So in March of 2018, which was the 50th anniversary of the Kerner Commission report, there was some talk about it. And I read articles like Washington Post. I read articles about it, but that really needs to really be looked at again because they already admitted what was going on. All right, so we have this study here from Citigroup, and then let's look at this one here. This other one. This deals with this is an article from thehill.com, and I forgot when this article came out a couple of days ago. Actually, let me pull this up. New research details effect of Black tax on African American. New research details effect of Black tax on home ownership. Okay, and this talks about how it's harder for African Americans to own a home and how much that costs us in lost retirement earnings, how much that cost us in lost retirement earnings. And this is tied to the wealth gap as well. Okay, so when Jared Kushner talks about African Americans have to be willing to be successful, you need to talk about leveling the playing field and addressing white supremacy and racism and systemic racism, and understand that racism is a system of advantage and privilege distributed based upon race. Okay, they don't want to address the system, and they don't want to address racism. They just want to say try harder. Okay, let's see here. So let's flip over to this one. This is from theheal.com. This is from October 22nd, 2020. New research details effect of black tax on African American home ownership. All right, and let's try to blow this up and close some of this stuff out. Blow this up. Okay. So African Americans are paying more than white Americans to own a home, making it harder for African American households to accumulate housing wealth at the same rate as their white counterparts, according to new research from MIT. So I told people when we went through and compared Biden's plan to Donald Trump's Fool's Gold plan, his platinum plan, I said read their policy platforms and compare their policies, right? When you look at Biden's plan, and once again, this is not an endorsement, I'm telling you, go read all this stuff. When you look at Biden's plan, Biden talks about creating, he lays out a plan to create wealth for African Americans. Okay, now it doesn't go as far as some of us would like for it to go. But when you compare the two, when you compare Biden's policies to Trump's, Biden's are much better. But we continue to push our issues and our agendas even after the election ends. That's the end of one process and beginning of another. Okay, so we still push for policies that are not even being proposed to us. And when you look at if you can go to joebiden.com, you can read a 22-page agenda, but they also have highlights of it for the African American community, things like that, and they deal with also creating wealth in the Black community also. And one of the things they're talking about is home ownership, and then addressing redlining also when it comes to loans from banks. All right, so in a study published earlier this month, MIT researchers found that African Americans pay $743 more annually than white Americans when it comes to mortgage interest payments. Okay, that on the surface, that sounds like a small amount, but it accumulates. Researchers found that African Americans pay $743 more annually than white Americans when it comes to mortgage interest payments, $550 more per year in mortgage insurance premiums, $190 more each year in property taxes, totaling more than $13,000 over the life of a loan. Okay, totaling more than $13,000 over the life of a loan. Now, the study authored by Ed Golding, executive director of the MIT Gallup Gallup Center, Michelle Aronowitz, former deputy general counsel for enforcement and fair housing at the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and Young Hyun Choi, a researcher with the Housing Finance Policy Center at the Urban Institute. They found that the inequities totaled $67,320 in lost retirement savings for African American owners. So that adds up to a lot of money when we look at lost retirement savings. And when we look at the median household net worth of a white family being about $171,000 and the median household net worth of an African American family being $17,000, and we're looking at African Americans losing out in about $67,000 in lost retirement savings. Okay, now citing income data. So once again, this doesn't have anything to do with not wanting to be successful, as Jared Kushner doesn't seem to understand. This deals with systemic racism that he doesn't want to address. Citing income data from the National Association of Real Estate Brokers, the country's oldest minority trade association, The study said it found an income gap of $25,800 between African Americans and white Americans, an income gap of $25,800 between African Americans and white Americans, to be exacerbated by the black tax on home ownership. So on top of the income gap that Donald Trump doesn't want to address, Jared Kushner doesn't want to address, on top of that, then you have the black tax on home ownership. Now, the elimination of those additional costs, the study said, would cut in half the roughly $130,000 gap in liquid retirement savings between white and African American families. The elimination of those additional costs, the study said, would cut in half the roughly $130,000 gap in liquid retirement savings between white and black families. The study also found that African Americans paid higher interest rates due to a lack of refinance opportunities, a problem researchers said results in African American home ownership, quote, approximately another $475 per year more than white homeowners, which results in a loss of retirement savings of nearly $20,000. All right. Now, Golding told The Hill that for a variety of reasons, African American families don't refinance or cannot refinance as easily or as quickly as white families. Quote, so when the Federal Reserve lowers interest rates, people refinance to lower their mortgage rate, but more African American families are stuck at the old higher rates, and our data shows that. While he went on to note that African American families have a higher unemployment rate, meaning, quote, they're more likely to be in that group that cannot refinance. They're more likely to be in that group that cannot refinance, end quote. Now, while the study notes that the inequities can be, quote, traced to the long history of slavery, Jared Kushner and Donald Trump don't want to deal with that. And Donald Trump is against reparations, just so in case people don't know. So is Moscow Mitch McConnell against reparations also. Okay. Now, Biden may not go as far on reparations as many people want, but he supports H.R. 40. And it's talked about on page 22 of his agenda. He supports H.R. 40. Donald Trump doesn't, and neither does Moscow Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell said reparations is dead on arrival in the Senate. As we discussed before, no bill can come to the Senate floor for a debate or a discussion without the approval of the Senate Majority Leader. As we discussed before, no bill can come to the Senate floor for a debate or a vote without the approval of the Senate Majority Leader. The Senate Majority Leader controls the Senate. He already said reparations is dead on arrival in the U.S. Senate. And then the only black Republican senator, Tim Scott of South Carolina, he already said he's voting against reparations in the Senate. So elections have consequences. So you have to understand how to advance, because reparations is a legislative process based upon Article 1 of the U.S. Constitution. It has to pass both chambers of the legislative branch of government, U.S. House of Representatives and U.S. Senate, before a president can sign it into law. Well, this president ain't going to sign it into law. He's against reparations. Trump is attacking the 1619 project, even though the 1619 project is flawed. We've talked about that here before. He's attacking the 1619 project. All right, let's continue here. Let's see. Okay, so while the study notes that the inequities can be traced to the long history of slavery, segregation, and race discrimination, It also points to current policy choices that maintain the disparities and suggests reforms. It also points to current policy choices that maintain the disparities and suggest reforms. Politics is the legal distribution of scarce wealth, power, and resources, and the writing of laws, statutes, ordinances, amendments, and treaties, their adoption, interpretation, and enforcement. For all the economic empowerment advocates and economic empowerment gurus, I understand it better than most people. Like I said, my degree's in business administration. Politics, laws, and regulations shape the economy that your Black-owned business operates within. So in 2016, when people were saying, we don't need to vote, we just need to do economic empowerment and invest in the stock market, I said, that's good. I'm not against that. But you also need to elect a president who's going to protect the economy that your Black-owned business depends upon and operates within. You also need to vote for a House of Representatives in the U.S. Senate that's going to pass legislation to help and protect the economy and your African-American owned business. And also the people who spend money with you in your business to keep you in business so you don't have to get a job on the assembly line next to them or get a job in a cubicle next to them, they depend on the healthy economy also. So a lot of times people don't understand how all this comes together. It ain't just about you, it's about we. It's about us. It's about understanding how all this impacts us, not your business as an individual. Your business depends upon people having money to spend with your business. So you stay in business. Otherwise, you have a grand opening and grand closing. Okay, so some policy recommendations. Let's see. Some policy recommendations include forming a government-supported insurance program that makes mortgage payments in the event of unemployment or disability, and including tax credits for the first-time homeowners, which could be used as a down payment to reduce the effect of risk-based pricing and the need for mortgage insurance. Now, the MIT study builds on previous research from the real estate website Redfin, Redfin, in June 2020 that found the home ownership rate for African Americans stood at less than 45% nationwide. It's at 44%, compared to 73% rate for white families. And an analysis published over the summer, authored by economist Troop Howard, an assistant professor of finance at the University of Utah, and Carlos Avanasio Leon, assistant professor of finance at Indiana University, found that African American and Hispanic residents bore a 10 to 13% higher property tax burden than white residents in the nation. A 10 to 13% higher property tax burden. So once again, that higher property tax burden that comes from their the value of the property being overassessed and them having to pay more in property taxes. And that historically is a way that land has been stolen from us. Also, that historically is a way that land has been stolen from us. But when you have to pay more in property taxes, that's cutting into money that you can use to do other things with, invest with, buy stocks, invest in the business, etc. All right. There was a article. There was a recent. We talked about this recently. I don't know if I can find this article, but there was one dealing with property tax assessment. And let me see something here. I'm gonna try to pull up this article because I dealt with this on one of my broadcasts. And one of the things is Washington Post. Black families pay significantly higher property taxes than white families, new analysis shows. Okay. Black families pay significantly higher property taxes than white families, new analysis shows. Now, while Lil Jared is talking about they need to want to be successful, okay, he doesn't want to address white supremacy and racism. Unfair property assessments lead to widespread overtaxation of Black Americans. Let's switch over to this article here. Okay, because I dealt with this also. Let's flip over. Okay, just a second here. Let's turn it on. Okay, this is from Washington Post. And I dealt with this, came out July 2nd, 2020. So I dealt with it when it came out. Black families pay significantly higher property taxes than white families, new analysis shows. Unfair property assessments lead to widespread overtaxation by Black Americans' home. Damn it, if you're going to use Black to denote 49 million people, at least capitalize Black. I hate it when they do stuff like that. Look at this. Now they got it in title, but that's just because it's the first. That's the first word in the name of the article. But right here, damn it, if you're going to use Black to denote African people, at least capitalize the being Black. All right. State by state, neighborhood by neighborhood, Black families pay 13% more in property taxes each year than a white family would in the same situation. And you know, when I write, I capitalize white, I capitalize B. If I use Black to denote African people, I capitalize the B, and I also capitalize the W in white, just to be fair. 13% more on property taxes each year than a white family would in the same situation. A massive new data analysis shows. Black-owned homes are consistently assessed at higher values relative to their actual sale price than white homes, according to a new working paper by economist Troop Howard of the University of Utah and Carlos Avenancio Leon of Indiana University. African Americans have long said they bear a disproportionate burden for taxes. Y'all see that? African Americans have long said they bear a disproportionate burden for taxes that support local police, schools, and parks. But nationwide measures of this type of systemic racism are hard to come by. To expose the structural and historical factors behind these discriminatory property tax assessments, The Economist analyzed more than a decade of tax assessment and sales data for 118 million homes throughout the country. Okay, more than a decade of tax assessment and sales data for 118 million homes throughout the country. In almost every state, property tax assessments were higher in areas with more African American and Hispanic residents. Okay, now look at the B lowercase and look at the H in Hispanic uppercase. In city after city, the authors show it is not just differences in the buildings or land, but also the racial composition of the neighborhood that matters. In city after city, the authors show it is not just differences in the buildings or land, but also the racial composition of the neighborhood that matters. The gap between white families and so-called minority households remains large, 10%, when you combine data from Hispanic and Black families. The authors excluded California because Proposition 13, passed in 1978, drastically changed how property is valued there. Okay, so they go through and show a chart how property taxes follow minority populations. Let's see here. We've always considered that in addition to paying your regular tax, there was a black tax. There was a black tax that goes along with it. Said Charles, who spoke on the condition that his last name not be used, citing elevated personal and professional risk faced by black men right now. Also, look at this article. Redlining was banned 50 years ago. It's still hurting minorities today. Okay. Redlining was banned 50 years ago. It's still hurting minorities today. All this deals with laws, policies, regulations that impact our conditions. Politics is the legal distribution of scarce wealth, power, and resources, and the writing of laws, statutes, ordinances, amendments, and treaties, their adoption, interpretation, and enforcement. And in this article here, one of the other Dorothy Brown, an Emory University law professor who researches systemic racism in tax policy and was not involved in the study, sees the same pervasive effect. Quote, the structure of the property tax system operates to disadvantage Black Americans, she said. The structure of the property tax system operates to disadvantage African Americans. That's how structural racism is. It's built into the system. Little Jared does not want to address this. Donald Trump does not want to address this. Okay. Mike Pence running around the country. 5 of his aides have coronavirus. He's holding super spread events. Donald Trump's holding super spread events. They don't want to address this. The property tax system itself discriminates against Black Americans. Now, inequities in tax assessment are among many factors weighing on African American home ownership rates nationwide. Facing the accumulated disadvantages of centuries of repression and systemic racism, African Americans are likely to earn less than similar white workers in lower paying service jobs, a dynamic that makes it more difficult to buy a home. Now, by hitting those jobs first and hardest, the coronavirus pandemic has made the bad situation worse. Now, this article came out in June. I think it was June this article came out. 1 in 5 Black households have reported missing a mortgage payment since mid-March, compared with about 1 in 20 white ones. Okay, now it's worse for white people because July 31st, 2020, that extra $600 a week in unemployment insurance from the federal government ran out. And Republicans have not come to an agreement with Democrats on another coronavirus bill. Okay, so yeah, you got a whole lot of white people missing mortgage payments too. Okay, so check out the rest of this article here. And it says 1 in 5 Black households have reported missing a mortgage payment since mid-March, compared with about 1 in 20 whites. During the Jim Crow era, let's turn this back on here. During the Jim Crow era, local white officials routinely manipulated property tax assessments to overburden and punish African American populations, and as a hidden tax break to land owning white gentry, said University of Virginia historian Andrew Carl. Okay, during the Jim Crow era, local white officials routinely manipulated property tax assessments to overburden and punish Black populations, and as a hidden tax break to land owning white gentry. Now, many county assessors intentionally overvalue Black people's properties, sometimes in direct retaliation for Black political action, Andrew Carl said, who has long researched the history of property tax discrimination against African Americans and has found white officials going to extreme lengths to hike the property tax value of African Americans. Now, right here in Detroit, it was revealed that it was, I think we found out through a newspaper article, but it was revealed that Detroiters, it didn't say specifically African-American Detroiters. It said Detroiters in general, but Detroit is 80% African-American. It was revealed earlier this year, I think it was earlier this year, that African-American homeowners were overassessed by $600 million in property taxes. They were overassessed $600 million in property taxes. Okay. And so you had people who lost their homes because they could not pay the property taxes. So a lot of people, when you read this article, one of the things it said is that for a lot of African Americans, because they feel, okay, this system was not created for us, they're less likely to question the assessment. They're less likely to question laws and regulations. They're less likely to get a second opinion or something like that because they say, oh, well, you know, this wasn't created for us, things like this, right? And then what happens is when they get a second assessment, a lot of times they find out, well, hold on, you were overassessed. I'm gonna see if I can pull up this article here. Yeah, Detroit News. Let's look at this quickly. Then we gotta get to this last story about Ocoee, Florida. Okay, it's just so much to cover. Yeah, we're gonna hurry up and get to this other story. All this stuff is connected. Let's turn back on the screen share. I'll show you this quickly here. Detroit Free Press. Detroit Free Press. Detroit homeowners overtaxed $600 million, January 9th, 2020. Okay. Detroit homeowners overtaxed $600 million. Detroit overtaxed homeowners by at least $600 million after it failed to accurately bring down property values in the years following the Great Recession, according to an investigation by the Detroit News. City Hall completed a state-ordered reappraisal of every residential property in 2017 to correct the problem, but the pain of its past mistakes remains with thousands who today face foreclosure over back taxes. And this is Ann Bolden, 55 years old, talks about the challenges she faced regarding property taxes and assessment after buying her home at an auction in 2011. She bought the home for $4,800 and it was taxed that year as if it was worth $57,000. She bought the home for $4,800 and the home was taxed as if it was worth $57,000. Now, for people, when Detroiters found this out, they raised hell, and they gave our white mayor Mike Duggan, holy hell, and he said the city don't have the money to refund the people how much they were overassessed in property taxes. Of the more than 63,000 Detroit homes with delinquent debt as of last fall, more than 90% were overtaxed. Of the more than 63,000 Detroit homes with delinquent debt as of last fall, 2019, more than 90% were overtaxed by an average of at least $3,700 between 2010 and 2016, according to calculations by the Detroit News. The debt owed on about 40,000 of those homes is less than the properties were overtaxed over the 7 years. Okay. The inflated bills have been an added burden to homeowners in the poorest big city in the nation, and call into question a tax system that has foreclosed on a third of city properties since 2008. At one time, Detroit Detroit and the Metro Detroit area at one time had the largest number of African-American homeowners in the country. And that was largely because of the auto industry. This is Motown. That's changed now. And a lot of our property was overtaxed, and many of us lost our property. And a lot of times we didn't know it was over assessed. We didn't know it was overtaxed. A lot of our property was stolen from us. It still continues today. Politics is the legal distribution of scarce wealth, power, and resources, and the writing of laws, statutes, ordinances, amendments, and treaties, the adoption, interpretation, and enforcement. I didn't say it's the fair distribution of scarce wealth, power, and resources. I ain't say that. All right. So read the rest of that article. We gotta move on. But all of this is connected together. All this deals with policies, laws, regulations. All of this is connected together. Let's see. All right, let's go back to the article from TheAHNShow.com. Let's finish this one up here. All right. So when discussing the home ownership gap in an interview this week, Antoine Thompson, executive director of NAREP, which works to promote democracy in housing, said the impact of racist practices in the country that have shut African Americans out of housing dating back to slavery is still being felt today. This is a legacy of slavery. It's not just 246 years of slavery. It's a legacy of systemic racism, redlining, housing discrimination. This is tied into a legacy of slavery. Thompson said the suggestion made in the MIT study to pool, POOL, pool risk among borrowers in lieu of risk-based pricing was a great idea and one that has been discussed before. All right. For Black Americans who lost their homes. Okay. Let me see here. Great Recession. The MIT study pointed to capital standards that it noted have, quote, the effect of placing the burden of staving off a repeat of the 2008 Great Recession on Black homeowners, even though Black homeowners were primarily the victims of the crisis, not its cause, even though African-American homeowners were primarily the victims of the crisis, not its cause. Because many African-Americans who could qualify for a traditional mortgage were still pushed into predatory mortgages and didn't know that they could qualify for a traditional mortgage and didn't have to pay these higher interest rates and then end up being foreclosed on because they couldn't afford it. Now, another key factor, he said, is employment and whether the country will be able to, quote, break this trend of African Americans going back to work slower than white Americans, citing data that shows white workers have been making job gains at faster rates than African American workers during the pandemic. Why doesn't Donald Trump want to address this when he talks about the lowest unemployment rate for African Americans? It ain't the lowest now, it's at 13%. It's at about 13%. He doesn't want to address he doesn't want to address any of this. The unemployment rate for African Americans was 7.8% in December 2016. So he takes oath of office January 2017. He inherited a low unemployment rate for African Americans. It continued to fall. He inherited a largely healthy economy from the Obama Biden administration. He doesn't want to give them credit for anything. All right, so check out this article here from TheAHNShow.com. New research details Effect of black tax on African American home ownership. New research details effect of black tax on African American home ownership. Okay. All right. We're gonna get into this last topic here. I didn't know we were going so long. It's just so much, and then I get carried away. Yeah, so it's just so. I mean, there's a whole lot more I want to talk about. I just don't have time. We'll save it for tomorrow night or something. All right. If you'd like this type of information, you can donate to the African History Network, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, also through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN Show, and at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Now, if you want to advertise with the African History Network, email us at customerservice@AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, customerservice@AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. And you can advertise during our daily show, Monday through Friday. And then we create a video commercial for you also. And we put your video commercial will run when we rebroadcast the shows, and the audio commercial will run on the audio podcast of our shows. We're on 9 different podcast platforms. We're on iHeartRadio, iTunes, Castbox, Stitcher, FM Player, TuneIn. Okay, so email us at customerservice@AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. All right, coming up Saturday, October 31st, 2020, Saturday, October 31st, 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Yolanda Spivey, who is an insurance expert, an expert broker, Yolanda Spivey, and attorney Nicole Compton are holding a live webinar dealing with estate planning and your wealth. Estate planning and your wealth. It's your time. We show you how to keep it in the family. Okay. Insurance and estate planning made simple, presented by Yolanda Spivey and Nicole Compton. Visit the website estateplanning.school for more information. And I'll be interviewing them later this week also. So check that out as well. We'll broadcast that here on our Facebook fan page and on our YouTube channel. All right. All right, how's everybody doing? April, Erica, who else we have watching? M. Mills, Lakeisha, just a few of the people watching. Leah. Everybody share this broadcast on your social media platforms. Invite your friends to tune in also, okay? Let's get to this last story. I ain't planning to be here this long, but I promised that we would do this story, so let's get to this last story. So I've read about the Ocoee Massacre before. November 1920 in Florida. Okay. November 1920 in Florida. And I saw a story from couple of days ago, and I wanted to talk about this on the Sunday night show, but we didn't have time. Proposal to pay descendants of Ocoee Massacre victims takes a step forward. Proposal to pay descendants of Ocoee Massacre victims takes a step forward. All right. And let's pull up this article also. So does this help? Does this help for me to actually show you the article as opposed to just talk about it? This is from yahoonews.com. This is from October 23rd, 2020. October 23rd, 2020, this article came out. Hey, okay, we've got Cynthia, April. Then also, okay, I forgot to tell you. All my DVD lectures are available at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We have my DVD lectures there in digital downloads, and have a lot of my DVD lectures in bundle packs. And we have the Africans who were here before Columbus, the 8 DVD bundle pack. And it includes a double lecture I did with Dr. David Imhotep, who wrote the book, The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence, double lecture with Professor Kabahaya Watha-Kamene, my lecture dealing with Christopher Columbus and the African Holocaust, deals with, have one from Dr. John Henry Clark, but it's an 8 DVD bundle pack. So check that out. That's on sale $50 right now at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. All right, let's continue here. Let's pull up this one. Let's go to this. All right. Okay, so proposal to pay descendants of Ocoee Massacre victims takes a step forward. This is originally a report about the Orlando Sentinel. Now, a pair of bills seeking compensation for descendants of the 1920 Election Day race riot in Ocoee. Oh, hold on. That's the wrong thing. I was trying to close out the video. A pair of bills seeking compensation for descendants of the 1920 Election Day race riot in Ocoee received favorable hearings from the State Senate Judiciary Committee. The bill sponsor, State Senator Randolph Bracey, compared his proposals to one of the most controversial bills in Florida history, a $2.1 million payment to survivors and descendants of racial violence in Rosewood. So that was in Rosewood, Florida. I've done a whole presentation dealing with the Rosewood Massacre. That was January 1923, 2 years after the attack in Tulsa. All right. There hasn't been a bill like this since Rosewood, so I'm excited it's moving forward. Senator Randolph Bracey said of the legislation approved in 1994. The violence in Central Florida nearly 100 years ago was arguably worse than what erupted in Rosewood on New Year's Day, January 1923, when a white married woman said she was assaulted by a black man. Okay, so her name was Fannie Taylor, if I remember correctly, Fannie Taylor. What happened was she was cheating on her husband. She was cheating on her husband with a white man. The white man beat her ass. She lied and said that a fictitious black man broke into the house and beat her. She didn't say he sexually assaulted her, but she said this black man beat her. Okay, no, it wasn't the black man that beat her. And what happened was there was an African-American man who was an escaped convict from a chain gang nearby. So some of the authorities were wondering if it was this black man who did it, who escaped. But a lot of people there in Rosewood, especially a lot of African-Americans, knew she was cheating on her husband, and they knew it wasn't the black man who did it. Okay, they knew she was cheating on her husband. All right. Eventually, that's gonna come out when you watch. So when you watch the movie Rosewood, came out, I think it was 1997, directed by the late John Singleton. Go back and watch that movie because I went and did like research on Rosewood, and the real history of Rosewood differs from the movie. I'm gonna have to re-air the video I did on that. The real history of Rosewood differs from the movie. A lot of those characters are real characters. Sylvester Carrier, who Don Cheadle played. Now, the character that Ving Rhames played, called Man, That's a fictitious character. He does not exist. He was probably a composite character, meaning that he was probably a combination of actions of some real life people that was just put into one character, but he didn't exist. And Sylvester Carrier, played by Don Cheadle. So at the end of the movie, you see Don Cheadle ride out of town on a horse, okay? And he tells Ving Rhames' character, I'll meet you in a nearby town, something like that. That didn't happen. His mother was Aunt Sarah, who was played by Esther Rolle. Sylvester Carrier was shot and killed on his porch after his mother, Aunt Sarah, was killed. They the deputies and the mob come to their house to ask questions. They shoot and kill Aunt Sarah. He shoots 2 other deputies, okay, and then they shoot and kill him. So like the real history of what happened is different than the movie, but I understand they had to take some poetic license in the movie to make it more exciting and to have somewhat more of a favorable outcome or result, because otherwise people would not have want to go see the movie. Okay. Now the two white men who owned the train that took them out of Rosewood, they existed. That did happen. They took women and children on that locomotive out to another town to get them out. But there's a lot of things in the movie that were not necessarily historically accurate, but at the same time, none of the historical movies, white or African-American, what have you, none of them are 100% historically accurate. None of them. Okay. All of them, many of them have fictitious characters that are composite characters. The way you make a historical movie is totally different than the way you do a documentary. All right. It's totally different. And a lot of people putting criticisms out about the movie Harriet and things like this don't understand the process. That's not how you make a historical theatrical film. Okay. All the movies there's fiction in all of them. Okay. First question you have to ask yourself is, where does the dialogue in the movie come from? Where does the script come from? They have to make it up. Unless it's a movie about a court case and all the dialogue comes from the transcript of the court case, where'd the script come from? They had to make it up. And so what they do is they study historical figures and they take a lot of the ideas of various historical figures and they attribute it maybe to one historical figure, or they create a composite character that is the embodiment of actions and ideologies of various historical figures or people at that time that may be lesser known. And they put all that into one character, okay, to give you a feel of what was going on at the time, the ideas that different people had. All right. So a lot of times it's not necessarily so important of did this character exist or not. It's understanding the ideas and the actions of people at that time. Okay. So this is why you have to go do more research beyond the movie. This is what the movies are just the tip of the iceberg. You have to go do more research beyond the movie. All right. Let's see here. Okay, let's go back to this, because I gotta get out of here. So the violence in Central Florida nearly 100 years ago was arguably worse than what erupted in Rosewood on New Year's Day, 1923, when a white married woman lied and said she was assaulted by a black man. And in the video I did on this, I said a white woman lied and black people died. Okay, we need to make a movie about that. A white woman lied and black people died. In Rosewood, a small black town 9 miles south of Cedar Key, the violence left 8 people dead, including 6 African Americans. In Ocoee, the election day fray killed an undetermined number of African-American residents, led by, now is this large, the font large enough for you all? Can you see? Led to the lynching of July Perry, okay, in Ocoee. The election day fray killed an undetermined number of African-American residents and led to the lynching of July Perry, a prosperous African-American labor broker who had registered many fellow African-Americans to vote. So Jared Kushner, he was prosperous. Was it because he tried harder? I'm just curious. Now, the massacre is regarded as the single bloodiest day in modern American political history and caused the exodus of virtually every resident identified in the 1920 census count as Negro. The massacre is regarded as the single bloodiest day in modern American political history and caused the exodus of virtually every resident identified in the 1920 census count as Negro. Now, Senator Bracey has proposed the state create an Ocoee Election Day Riots Descendant Compensation Trust Fund. Okay, Ocoee Election Day Riots Descendant Compensation Trust Fund, and direct educators to find ways to include the Ocoee Massacre in required instruction on African-American history. All right. So that's important because you have a lot of people in Tulsa that don't know the history of Black Wall Street. So things like this have to be incorporated into the educational system in those cities, but across the country. These are things we need to know about across the country, because those that don't know their history are destined to repeat it. To keep things like this from happening in the future, you have to deal with this history. All right. Now, although his bill originally called for the state to budget $25 million for the fund, he dropped the provision before the committee hearing. He said a figure would likely be negotiated later. Now, most of the committee, including Chairman David Simmons, Republican from Longwood, Florida, voted to support the bills Tuesday, though State Senator Dennis Baxley, Republican of Ocala, Florida, voted a loud no, but without comment. All right. Now, Sever Newsom III, Sever, S-E-B-E-R, Sever Newsom III, an advocate for the preservation of Confederate monuments, urged the committee to reject the concept of reparations. Okay. He said, quote, "I agree it was a horrible incident and it should be known on markers and in museums and taught in school," he said. "But when you want to pay reparations to the descendants of these victims, you are going too far and you will be opening a legal can of worms." He said, hold on. What's the legal can of worms? I don't understand this. What's the legal can of worms? But when you want to pay reparations to the descendants of these victims, you are going too far and you will be opening a legal can of worms. He said other victims will want compensation from the state for their own unfortunate events. Now, the Rosewood legislation signed into law in 1994 by then Governor Lawton Chiles set aside $1.5 million for survivors and allotted $500,000 to cover property damage and a $100,000 scholarship fund for descendants. Okay. So, when I hear people say things like this, but when you want to pay reparations to the descendants of these victims, you're going too far and you'll be opening a legal can of worms. It sounds like they feel guilty. It sounds like, it sounds like they feel guilty for what was done. You know, we'll teach about it in school, but we don't want to be held accountable. Now, Senator Bracey said he believes the state also owes descendants of victims of the Ocoee tragedy because state authorities were part of a deputized mob that attacked the community and robbed land-owning blacks of their property. Oh, is maybe that why you don't want to pay reparations? You don't really want, you really don't want to deal with like really what happened. Okay. Senator Bracey said he believes the state also owes descendants of victims of the Ocoee tragedy because state authorities were part of a deputized mob that attacked the community and robbed land-owning African Americans of their property. Quote, it was a great miscarriage of justice, and obviously the government did not do anything to investigate or bring anyone to justice, he said. Now, if Bracey's bill becomes law, claimants could receive up to $150,000 as direct descendants of each person killed, injured, or otherwise victimized by the violence nearly a century ago. The tragedy will be marked by centennial observances this year in the city of Ocoee, which is planning a permanent memorial, and the Orange County Regional History Center, which is planning a special exhibit. All right. So let's see here. Now, newspapers, including the Orlando Evening Star, reported that two whites, World War I veterans Elmer McDaniel and Leo Bogard, were fatally wounded in the siege. I'm gonna give some background information on exactly what happened. But counts of African American casualties vary. Some news accounts reported 6 African Americans were killed, 5 in fires, but the group that built the National Memorial for Peace and Justice in Montgomery, Alabama, maintains 32 African Americans died. An article written by scholars with ties to Rollins College in Winter Park and published in the Florida Historical Quarterly in 2014 noted, quote, 2 distinct narratives of the riot exist from the white and black perspectives. 2 distinct narratives of the riot exist from the white and black perspectives. Now, the raid on the black settlement was led by Samuel Salisbury, Salisbury, who formerly served as Orlando police chief and later an Ocoee, Florida mayor. In November 2018, Ocoee, Florida city commissioners officially recognized the atrocities with a proclamation. It vowed November 2nd, because November 2nd, 1920 is when the attack took place. It vowed November 2nd should be, quote, declared a day of remembrance for those residents of Ocoee and West Orange County who lost their lives and property through an act of domestic terror. All right. So check out this article here. Proposal to pay descendants of Ocoee Massacre victims takes a step forward. All right. This is by Stephen Hudak. Or Hudak, Hudak, October 23rd, 2020, yahoonews.com, picked up from the Orlando Sentinel. And let's see here. We'll post a link to this article here. Deputized mob. Yep. Deputized mob. How's everybody doing? All right, everybody, share this broadcast on your social media platforms. African-American business owners, post the name of your business here on the thread of the broadcast. We'll let you know how you can advertise with the African History Network. Email us at customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com, customerservice@africanhistorynetwork.com. Okay. And you can advertise with our daily show also. All right, let's look at this last article. This deals with, well, I'll give you the name of one. We'll look at 2. This deals with the Ocoee Massacre. November 2nd, 1920, Zen Education Project has a good article dealing with the Zen Education Project. November 2nd, 1920, the Ocoee Massacre. November 2nd, 1920, the Ocoee Massacre. And then Vice.com has an extensive article on this also, Vice.com, entitled "The Time That White People Burned and Pillaged a Community on Election Day." A time that, and let me pull this up here. Let's get the full name of this article. Let me give you the link to this other article here. Black families pay significantly higher property taxes than white families, new analysis shows. That's from the Washington Post. We'll give you that link also. So when we deal with policies addressing conditions, this is what we're talking about. Okay. This is this is why, not just for president, but senator, U.S. House representatives, city council, things like this, go study their policy platforms. Their policies have to address these conditions. Okay. All right. All right. Let's look at this one here from, let's bring this up from the Zen Project. Oh, Vice.com. It's the full name of it. I think this is, at time white people burned and pillaged Black community. I think this is on election day. Vice.com. What's the full name of this article here? Yeah, on election day. This is from Vice.com, February 27th, 2017. This is by Deborah Douglas. Let me, I'll show you the title of this one. Maybe a little graphic. What the hell? That time, white people burned and pillaged a Black community on election day. The 1920 massacre in Ocoee, Florida, involved white lynchings, castrating, and removing hundreds of Blacks from their land in retaliation for them trying to exercise their right to vote. So when people say Black people did not die for the right to vote, they're a damn lie. That's not true. You haven't studied the history. Now, I'm not saying that we vote today because our ancestors died for the right to vote or some of them died. That's not what I'm saying. Okay. We vote for policies that impact our conditions today and the future. Now we need to understand this history of the past and what some of our ancestors went through. We need to understand this, but I'm not saying the reason why we vote or you have to vote because people died for the right to vote. I'm not saying that at all. No. Okay. Because I understand, we talked about this before. I do understand people trying to motivate people, saying people died, things like this. You vote because of policies and how they will impact you, your family, your community, your people. You vote for policies that will improve your conditions today, address issues today and in the future. The reason why you don't just vote because many of our ancestors died for the right to vote is because if you are an uneducated voter, you could be voting and putting people in the office who are trying to undo the legacy and fight against what your ancestors fought for because you are an uneducated voter. So you don't just vote to vote. You have to be educated. It's just like driving a car. You just don't jump in a car and drive and haven't had any lessons, don't have a license. And you just driving around. No, it's a free country. I can do what I want to do. No, don't. No. All right. So we have to We have to understand that you could be voting for people and putting them in office who are working against the legacy in what your ancestors fought for because you're uneducated. All right, let's look at this last thing here. So let's look at the Zen Project. And here's the one from Yahoo News. All right, so in response to an attempt, let's look at the article from the Zen Project. In response to an attempt by African Americans to exercise their legal and democratic right to vote, at least 50 African Americans were murdered in a brutal massacre in Ocoee, Florida on November 2nd, 1920. November 2nd, 1920. Yeah, let me pull this up here. And now what is called the Ocoee Massacre. So there's also a documentary on this called Ocoee on Fire, the 1920 Election Day Massacre. So on November 1st, the day before the election, with robes and crosses, the Klan paraded through the streets of the two African-American communities in Ocoee, Florida, late into the night. With megaphones, they warned that, quote, not a single Negro will be permitted to vote, end quote. The Klan warned not a single Negro will be permitted to vote. And if any of them dared to do so, there would be dire consequences. Now, election day came and at least some African Americans did attempt to vote, okay, in Orange County, Florida. However, none were permitted to enter their respective polling places. White enforcers camped out around the centers, and poll workers were given instructions to deflect their attempts. Okay, white enforcers. That sounds like poll watchers, like some of these armed poll watchers that are showing up. That sounds like poll watchers. And Donald Trump is telling his followers to sign up as poll watchers and go monitor the polls. But he's not telling them to stay in their white communities and monitor the polls. He's basically telling them to go into other people's communities and monitor the polls. White enforcers camped out around the centers, and poll workers were given instructions to deflect their attempts. One by one would-be African-American voters were turned away either by threats of violence or by poll workers who found their names mysteriously absent from the voter registration rolls. You mean like voter suppression? You mean like they were removed from the voter rolls, like in Georgia? Hundreds of thousands of people removed from the voter rolls. You mean that names just disappeared from the voter rolls? This is 1920. It's 100 years ago. One by one, would-be voters, African-American voters, were turned away either by threats of violence or by poll workers who found their names mysteriously absent from the voter registration rolls. Pollsters instructed them to get documentation from Notary Republic, R.C. Bigelow, to verify that they were indeed registered to vote. Conveniently, however, R.C. Bigelow was unable to be located because he was out on a fishing trip that day. Was Andy and Opie with them? I'm just with little, he was the only Notary Republic they could go to. Okay. With little other option, most of the African Americans returned to their homes without casting their ballots. Mose Norman, M-O-S-E, would not be so easily deterred. After being turned away that morning in his Ocoee precinct, He rode to Orlando to seek the counsel of Judge Cheney. Now, Mose Norman was a very prosperous African American at this time. Okay, maybe he was a exceptional black or something that Donald Trump probably called an exceptional black. You're not like the rest of them. You tried harder. Okay, I guess that's maybe how Jared Kushner would put it. You tried harder. Now, Norman returned to Ocoee with these instructions. Let's see. Mose Norman would not be so easily deterred after being turned away that morning in his Ocoee precinct. He rode to Orlando to seek the counsel of Judge Cheney. The attorney instructed him to write down the names of any African Americans who were not permitted to vote, and also the names of the poll workers who had denied them their constitutional right. Now, Judge Cheney said a lawsuit against the county could be brought to contest this violation. Now, Mose Norman returned to Ocoee with these instructions, along with a handful of black citizens, again seeking to vote. As you can imagine, things did not go well. After again being forcibly turned away, he demanded the poll workers' names and exclaimed, "We will vote by God." This is what Mose Norman said. "We will vote by God." Now, the response by the Klan was a massacre. The response by the Ku Klux Klan was a massacre. One of the people killed was Julius July Perry. And they have a description of Perry. Okay, so they have a description of Perry from the documentary Ocoee on Fire. Now, July Perry had become the well-respected godfather of the African-American community. He served as a deacon in the church, and the local labor leader or straw boss. It was said that anyone seeking to employ African-American laborers needed to speak with him first. He was an admired, brave, and rational thinker, a sort of civil rights leader before there was a civil rights movement. He encouraged young African Americans to be educated and stand up for themselves as first-class citizens. Now, July Perry's wife, her name was Estelle, his 3 sons and daughter, Coretta Perry Caldwell, lived on a large estate that included their home and several barns and outbuildings. They regularly opened their doors to anyone in need. If anyone was in trouble, they knew they could find advice and sanctuary in the Perry home. Okay. And check out the documentary Ocoee, Legacy of the Election Day Massacre. Ocoee, Legacy of the Election Day Massacre came out in 2008. All right. If we look quickly here at the article from Vice.com. And here's the one from the Zen Project. We look very quickly here at the one from Vice.com on page 5. Some accounts say that Mose Norman managed to flee the city completely, while others say he went to his friend July Perry's home, another landowning black in Ocoee who had been helping with the voter registration effort. It has been said that July Perry had voted early in the election to avoid being challenged at the polls. Thanks to the efforts of Perry and Norman, local whites were now worried about the boldness of local blacks. They wanted to make an example out of them, so Perry's home became a target. Armed with guns, a white mob. Let's see the train. Armed with guns, a white mob descended on July Perry's property. A shootout between the family in the home and the mob on the outside ensued, with July Perry managing to hit two of the white men, forcing the white terrorists to regroup. The mob returned later and captured July Perry. He was taken to a jail in Orlando, where he was snatched up by a mob yet again. July Perry was lynched the following day, according to several sources, including Jason Burns, Florida, including Jason Burns' Florida history blog. Drunk off the violence and lusting for more blood, the white mob turned its wrath onto two African-American areas of Ocoee, Florida. The mob set fire to rows of black-owned homes, black churches, and black schools. Okay. The African-Americans in the community tried to fight back using firearms and shootouts, but the mob prevailed and went about torturing anyone who remained. One black man, James Langmead, Langmead, he refused to leave. For his valiance, according to one account, he was castrated. Quote, one woman heavily pregnant has stayed in her home because she did not think she could run fast enough to escape the deputized whites. Her mother, unwilling to leave her alone, perished with her in the flames. One man hiding in a barn tried to escape when the mob set fire to it, but ran back inside to his death after the mob shot at him. Now, as many as 500 African Americans were removed from their land. As many as 500 African Americans were removed from their land after the violent riot. This is the article from Vice.com. As many as 500 African Americans were removed from their land after the violent riot. The Ku Klux Klan set an embargo around the town to ensure that none of them could come back to their homes. In the meantime, the whites seized their property, sometimes with deeds requiring that the land, quote, never be conveyed to Negroes again. Sometimes with deeds requiring that the land never be conveyed to Negroes again. So they're still in their property, and then in the deeds that they're creating, the deeds that they're getting for the property, there's a clause in there. So when they sell the land, it stipulates that the land can never be sold to a Negro again. Okay. So I guess maybe Jared Kushner, they just didn't try hard enough. All right. Check out the rest of this article here from Vice.com. And there's an interview in here with a man who was a survivor of the massacre. He was 13 years old at the time that it took place. I'm not sure which year this is from, but let's go to this clip here. This is in the article. This deals with the Ocoee, Florida race riot in 1920.
Of course, we saw the movie.
Let's start from the beginning. Couldn't hear that.
Welcome back to Our Legacy, the Willie Clark Show Black History Month special. You know, many people know about the story of Rosewood, the North Florida town that was destroyed by whites in 1920. Of course, we saw the movie, right? But not many people know that there was a similar incident right here in Central Florida in the city of Ocoee. It occurred on Election Day, 1920, when Mose Norman, an African-American, went to the polls and attempted to vote. He was turned away, but he returned later with a shotgun. He was disarmed and beaten by whites. And later, his friend July Perry obtained a note from the judge saying that indeed he and Mose Norman were eligible to vote in this election. Later that afternoon, a group of whites burst into July Perry's home. Mr. Perry, armed with a shotgun, killed 2 of the white men. He was arrested and taken to the Orlando jail. Later on that day, a mob of whites broke into the jail, removed Mr. Perry. He was taken out and lynched. Throughout the remainder of the day in Ocoee, a riot ensued as whites went about burning black churches, homes, and businesses. 5 blacks were killed, and by the end of the day, no blacks resided in the city of Ocoee. It would be 50 years before African Americans would return. Reverend Fred L. Maxwell, who has been the pastor of the St. John Missionary Baptist Church here in Orlando for 34 years, joins us now. He was just 13 at the time of the race riot, but he remembers it very well. Pastor Maxwell, thanks for joining me for the program.
I'm more than grateful.
Could you take us back to 1920 and your remembrances of the Ocoee race riot? I understand you were familiar with Moses Norman and also July Perry.
Right.
In that.
Now, the voting took place the early morning of November 7th. And of course, as a result, a riot, an insurrection occurred. And throughout the day, many people were hurt. But it just so happened that one good friend of my father, Mose Norman, was one of the outstanding citizens and property owners in the Ocoee area. And when he saw that the situation had gotten out of hand, and the clan, for at least the mobsters, began setting fire to homes of black people, plus the churches, 2 churches, and Masonic Hall. And Mose Norman, he took off in his Columbia 6 automobile and came by the home of our family and called my father and related to my father what was going on. And of course, Mose Norman was able to escape the wrath of the mob. But unfortunately, Mr. July Perry, of course, employing his weapons and ammunition, attempting to defend himself and family, he was shot and wounded in his cane.
And I understand Mr. Norman had just talked about or come from July Perry's house just before he came to your house.
He left Mr. July when he discovered that Mr. July Perry had been shot. Then Mose, for his safety, he took off and escaped. And he came by our home and called my father. And
now,
of course,
you're over in Apopka. Now, the rioting did spill over to an Apopka, but what were the senses of the time? I mean, what was the mood amongst people? Were people, I mean, even before the elections took place, were people aware there's going to be trouble? I would imagine in 1920 and the Voting Rights Act just hadn't been passed.
Yes.
In 1920.
Mr. Norman also said to my father that some nights before, perhaps a week before, that the Ku Klux Klan had conducted a parade late one night, and they were speaking over bugles, warning the blacks that on election day, don't go to the polls. If you do, it's going to be serious trouble.
So these were brave and courageous men.
Oh, yeah.
They knew what they were in for.
That's right.
They understood what the problem was.
Yes. So now Mr. Norman, of course, before he came to my father, he came to Orlando and called for then a federal judge. I can't remember the judge's name, and explained to him what happened. And the judge informed him, says, well, if you can survive this, you can bring a lawsuit because you are entitled to vote. So since they denied you all the opportunity to vote, you can sue the county or the state. But so then Mr. Perry left the judge, came on to my father, and of course informed my father of what happened, and then he disappeared. So we don't know what became of him.
You were a very young child at that point.
I was 13 years of age.
How did that impact your life? What What was the statement there? And I know you've been an outspoken advocate for the rights of African Americans in Central Florida for a long time.
Yes.
That one of the incidents that inspired you?
It had quite an impact, a devastating impact, because from age 6 in 1913, my first day in school, it was a wonder to me, why was it that we black children had to walk past the white school to go to our black school. And of course, there's a lot more in there that time won't permit us now to explain.
One quick question before I let you go, though. You stated to me that you felt that if the state of Florida paid reparations to the families of survivors of Rosewood, that they should do likewise for Ocoee. Would you agree with that statement?
Yeah, indeed so. It's my firm belief. Why not?
Pastor,
why not?
Thank you very much for joining the program.
Yes, sir.
I really appreciate having you.
All right. And thank you, Son Clark. And may I just commend you for the great work, the great contribution you're making to our most prosperous community. And I believe that your continued efforts will do the more to make it better for all concerned.
Thank you very much.
All right. So that was that video was in the article, and he was 13 years old when the massacre took place. Okay. And his father was a friend of Mose Norman. All right. So check out this article once again from vice.com. That time white people pillaged, burned. That time white people burned and pillaged a black community on election day. That time white people burned and pillaged a black community on election day. Okay. Look, everybody, here, we're going to get out of here. I didn't mean to go this long. We're here Monday through Friday, 11 p.m. to 12 midnight Eastern Standard Time. Sometimes you go past that. Remember, at the African History Network, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right now it's corrects wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. Wakanda forever. We'll talk to you tomorrow night. Peace.